You're welcome to the Naija Filmmaker, a podcast about Nigerian filmmakers, their films, and how we can build a diverse and functional industry. I'm your host, Selegot. On this episode, my guest is Chioma Onyenwe. She's a storyteller, art curator, and deep sea diver. She has produced projects in numerous mediums such as film, documentary, and stage. We talk about producing across mediums, festival programming, and what it means to truly direct a project. If you're a new listener, you're welcome and I hope you enjoy. Hi Chioma, you're welcome to the Naija Filmmaker.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so can you introduce yourself?
I'm Chioma. I'm a storyteller. I'm an art curator. I'm an aspiring surfer and a deep diver, just general. And I try to tell stories kind of intersection of history, culture, identity, and across different mediums. So I work on stage, on podcast, on theater, documentaries, film. And that's me, I guess.
Okay, so I read that you studied economics in university.
Yes, I did. I studied economics.
Okay, so what was your introduction to the film industry?
I think my introduction to the film industry was always through storytelling. I read a lot of books, I watched a lot of films, and it was always something I was interested in. But as a career, I didn't start to think about it fully until maybe my final year in university. So while I was studying economics, I would volunteer on people's sets as a production assistant for a documentary here, a feature there. And my final year thesis was about Nollywood, and about how we can generate income and revenue and jobs. So it was always something I'd been interested in. But it wasn't until after I finished school and that I started to make films. Okay.
And you went to film school at the Met Film School in London.
Yeah, I did. So first of all, I did weekend courses. So when I was doing, of course, my master's, and it was also in management.
Yeah.
I wanted to do film school instead, but I didn't get the money to do that. So what I did was I started to do weekend courses. So I did weekend courses at London Film Academy, and then after I finished my master's, I did a 2-month course at Met Film School.
Yeah.
And then I still try to work because before then I worked in consulting and investment banking. So I still tried to do some project management work before I decided to go full time into film.
Okay. And how was the film school experience? Was it insightful, formative?
Yeah, of course. It was it was interesting, I guess. The best thing about film is really that it's collaborative.
Yeah.
And it's also can be the worst thing about film is that it's collaborative. So you have no control over a lot of things. So you have to trust, you have to be vulnerable. And it was a good experience, mainly because it was, you have to work with people and knowing that there are people who are equally as vested, equally as passionate, and we're all students together, but we're all invested in making sure everybody's film had great output, so that was great. And yeah, so I think that's where you're really stuck with the passion, you're stuck with people. You have people who are there just for the love of it, and then you come out of film school and and then everything changes.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best thing about film school.
Okay. And you went on to direct a feature, 8 Bars and a Clef.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit about that project? How you started it and making the movie.
So 8 Bars and a Clef. How did that start? That's such a long time ago. But yeah, so I think, it's for me, I guess I tend to jump into the deep end. of things, right? So before then, I had done like a web series called God Damn It Is Monday.
Yeah.
And I had done another short film. I done another I've done some short form content. So I was like, oh, I was ready to make a feature, and I knew that I wanted it to be based on to be kind of have a message, in a sense.
Yeah.
So that was where that came from, because my cousin is dyslexic, and I wanted to kind of tell that story, but in in an entertaining way. And yeah, I guess it was a baptism by fire. I think it's a lot more lesson making that film than any year film school can give you.
Yeah.
But it was important for me to make it, and I was also able to get some funding from Nollywood. There was the Jonathan thing where they were, what's it called? Project Nollywood.
Act Nollywood or something.
Project Act Nollywood, yes, exactly. So for a first feature, and I had applied without knowing anybody, kind of completely blank, and I got in, and I was able to get money out to make to finish the film, or to make the film.
Yeah.
So that was very encouraging, because it was I honestly didn't know anybody. But then before then, I had volunteered for AFRIF, so I started to meet people within the industry. But yeah, it was a good process to start and finish, and to get it onto the cinema and get it onto distribution, and to learn. But it was an expensive learning curve.
Okay, so taking raising financing, making the film, going all the way to distribution, what did you particularly learn about the way Nollywood operates? What should people look out for?
So I think the first thing I would say is don't try to do everything yourself, right? So what happens a lot is, maybe because you secured some financing, you want to direct, you want to act, you want to produce, direct, you want to kind of do the long haul. It really helps to have a team. So I did reach out to a couple of people initially to kind of more to act as a supervisory producer for me. But I wasn't able, our timelines were not able to work, and with the budget I had as well. But that really helps, and to also take your time. So every time, I think with Lagos in general, it always feels everybody is rushing, so you get in touch with an actor, they'd be like, I'm only available for this date, so you feel you have to make your project work for the dates, but no, it's the other way around. You have to own your project. You have to take charge of that. So, and even if it means that you don't work with the talent you want to work with, or is your first choice, it helps to own the project. You know what I mean? So that's very important. So don't get carried away. Don't let anybody sway you, move your vision. What will be for you will be for you. That's one. And if it follows through, because at the end of the day, your film is your film is your film that would last for the rest of your life. So you'll be able to sell it over and over again, if it's great, if it's good. So there's really no rush. So take your time through the entire process, from the scripting to the shooting to, the post-production. I know it sounds indulgent, but when you think about a project in the span of the lifetime of the project, then you see that 1 year is nothing, 2 years is nothing, So trying to get everything done in a few months, it doesn't pay in the long run, in my opinion. The more you kind of take time with it, you're able to figure out who is invested in it at the same time. And ask questions. Don't go anything blind. If there's anybody you need to get in touch with. Ask about everybody. Find out where people have worked before. Ask about them. Ask about how they work. Do your due diligence, because do your due diligence. And I'm not just saying that in a negative way. it's not just to be negative. It's also like it's your responsibility, if it's your project, to know how how this particular actor works, or what they will respond to more, or how, so you can start to take ownership of your project. That's one. And then I guess that's mainly it. Because if you do your homework, and if you're the director, get a producer. If you're the producer, get a director. Like, you don't come in like trying to do everything. So hopefully you're able to like balance that out. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So at AFRIF, you were a program director and also at some point the artistic director.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. So can you break down those two roles for us? What were your responsibilities?
So I started at AFRIF as a volunteer. So I was volunteering within the program. So more like, so the program is like the program director or program, well, whatever. It's mainly, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not really stuck on titles, but it's really it's about coordinating the program, right? So even when I became like artistic director, I was still coordinating the program, you know. So, and AFRIF has training, it has capacity building stuff, it has master classes, it has industry sessions, it has films, that needs to be programmed in terms of for the week, when it's, what are the films coming in. So at some point it started with, we had like artistic director who would select the films. So that's like the job of the artistic director, is to say, these are the films that we want in the program. And then you kind of coordinate around that, so who are the filmmakers? Where are the films? Have they arrived? What days do we schedule it for? Who wants a premiere status? Things like that. Or who has a premiere status? Who do we give like, the best time slots to? Things that's coordinating the film program. Then the industry sessions, who's coming to talk, who's part of a panel. The only thing I wasn't kind of like hands-on on was the parties, because that was a different department. But then the artistic is now, but over time, like, because I would watch like, and AFRIF was amazing because it was really my introduction to African cinema. Yeah, AFRIF is amazing. It's still holding in November this year. It was my introduction to African cinema. The first film I saw was Jamil Kubeka's A Good Report. And before then, it was a complete like blank slate. I hadn't seen anything. I hadn't really seen anything on the continent. And over the course of time, seeing films like, I'm Not a Witch, Nairobi Half-Life, to be able to like, watch out for what these filmmakers are doing, and start to program, start to think about, what are the films that we want to see in the festival. Started to do more documentary watching as well. And then, so that's really like the progression. So there's still the, the runaround part, but then there's also the artistic, like, I want to see these films, like these are the films that we should select for this year, because this is what we want to see, things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And like, you've been a programmer for AFRIF for several years, and then you also programmed the short film category for Durban International Film Festival. And you're also doing that for the widescreen film festival. Yeah. So what do programmers look for when they are trying to select films for their festivals?
So, I mean, like, it's so subjective. That's why it's so, it's very subjective. But really, I think after, it's really, what do I enjoy? Yeah. And that's why it's good to have a diverse group of programmers, because we enjoy different things. Yeah. So at the very first basic level, it has to be well made. So this is not a question about like, is the sound good, or no, that's not what it's about. Yeah. Because there should be like normally like pre-selectors that would at least make it just to so technically you're on the same. I mean, some might have like more pizzazz, but there's a technical minimum that you have to meet. But really, it's it's sometimes with like Wild Screen, it's a nature documentary, natural world storytelling festival, and it was my first time like really immersing myself in those kind of documentaries. Yeah. And it's the type of thing that coming from more like African cinema, like watching, stories about the lynx or about a father and a son who had to going on this adventure to take photographs of all the wild cats in the world. Like it was completely different experience, but it was also very enjoyable because it was storytelling, and that's the most important thing is like, are you true to your story?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter like what genre it is. It doesn't matter like, if you're watching a cat, like it doesn't matter like if you're watching like an action horror film or, like, but who are your characters and do they have a journey and can you take us on that journey with them? And that's really like the core of everything, because even in like I think I saw Everything Everywhere at Once, like even in films that are so expansive and have such wide the multiverse stories, like the core, there's still a character journey, like it's like, what does this character want?
Yeah.
And do I care about this character, and do I care enough about this character to get on this journey with this character for the next 90 minutes to 2 hours, or if it's a short 15 minutes, I saw even the winning short for Diff this year as well, and it's really about that. Like, do I care? Why should I care? And the character can be, not living thing, but but like even in telling stories of of Romania, of like the earth, like there's still like narration, there's still music, there's still there's still things that go into the storytelling that makes me invested.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important thing. So it doesn't matter if it's a docu, it doesn't matter if it's a feature or short. It's just, why should I care? But like I say, like it's what I enjoy, and it's coming into that knowledge that people care about your point of view. So I find things might be really well done, like really well, really well performed and really well acted, but I find that I don't care, or it's not from me, and and it's I wouldn't select it, so it's really about like the point of views of different people, and that's why it's so subjective, and that's why it can be so infuriating as a filmmaker. And sometimes there's a mandate to tell a particular topic. If there's a theme around the festival, people want to tell stories, people want to focus on a particular theme. So if your film is within that theme and it's not as well done, there might be some leeway, and it's not necessarily like quota or like diversity quotas or things like that, but sometimes you find that you haven't been as open to work from certain areas or work from certain, and so you're a bit more open to it, and because you're open to it, you come at it easier in a sense. So so sometimes there's that, but it's really tell a good story, tell a story that is true to you, and take us on an interesting journey.
Yeah. Okay. In your directing journey, like what insights have you learned that informs the way you approach projects, the way you direct your projects?
So I think for me, like, because I studied economics, right? So producing comes easier to me. It's more of and it's not even just because I studied economics. Like as a project manager, as things like that. Like I can produce in my sleep. Directing tends to take more out of me. It requires me to be more vulnerable. I don't like that very much.
Yeah.
But so like in a sense, like I haven't directed as much, I'd say, but then it just requires me to mainly, I guess, more documentaries now.
Yeah.
But to be more vulnerable. It's more work for me. And because I don't so I guess it has to really, for my choices now in choosing to direct, like it has to really stay with me.
Yeah.
So if it's a story or something, and I don't write as much, so I work with writers all the time. I think the only thing I've written and directed myself was my very first web series, God Damn It Is Monday. And that was an adaptation from a blog. But yeah, like I guess like it's more, there's so many stories to tell, but if I feel like I can only be the one to tell it, then that's when I can consider directing it.
Yeah.
But if I feel like, it doesn't belong to me, like, I can make it happen, but does this story belong to me, then there's no need.
Yeah. And for the vulnerability part, like, is it that maybe because you're not so comfortable with it, you have to give in more, or like what makes it, like, what elicits the vulnerability?
So the thing about it, as a director, like it's very much what is your point of view.
Yeah.
And you have to be confident in, and you have to have a point of view, and I guess that's and it depends, like it can be, I mean, there's a story. If it's fiction, there's a script and you have to interpret that, but then everyone, it's really like, what is your vision about this? Like, like it's kind, what can you see it? Does it come to you? Like, and some things just don't, like it's not. So there's a skill level for it, which is great. But really, like, it's vulnerable for me. Like, I guess speaking on even like maybe the last short, the documentary short, was, I mean, this was a story that I had stayed with for 3 years plus. And in finding the subject, in connecting with the subject, with Mercy, and in and she so many times, I was infuriated, but in but in a very personal way, like even before her, even in like the interviews before, even to like craft the story, the pre-work, to like to figure out like what kind of the film, and the idea that was in the film that I set out to make. I set out to make a completely different film, and it was an absentee film. The goal of my film was, her husband was not around, and so I'm going to get this wedding with a portrait.
Yeah.
And because the man wasn't there, and then the wedding didn't even happen. Because we got stuck in the bride price negotiation. So, and just not having that, for instance, like I got stuck. Because. And for months, like I couldn't figure out like what the film was, as opposed to like, so it was even with like consultants, it's like, okay, like what do you have? So let's go back to what you actually have. But things like that, like, it gets to me. I guess that's why it's like, as a producer, I can be more practical. I can, it's about the project, so we have to make it work. So, but with directing, like everything like gets to me, like with the talent, like I take it personal, like, are you? So that's where the vulnerability comes in. But it's more like it's and I like, and I really have to like tap in. You have to connect. You have to like get in touch. You have to call. You have to. Whether it's a documentary subject or an actor, you have to be really invested. You have to care. As a director, to me, as a producer, not as much. I think because I have like more like project priority, and like we need to get this done within this budget, within this time frame. We need this. We need to do this. And fine, like I am a creative producer, but I can divest, my emotional core a bit more. So that's what I'm referring to.
Okay. So let's talk about this documentary. The name is Ime Ego, yeah?
Ime Ego, yes.
Ime Ego. And you talked about being with this project for 3 years. So can you like tell us about the timeline? Because I mean, it's currently on ArtDey, and I'm going to put it in the show notes. And Generation Africa was involved. So, like, how did the whole thing come together? You had this story, you had the different documentary you wanted to make, and there were, I guess, like maybe some grants that you got to make this documentary. So, how did everything come together? Let's start from the story you wanted to tell.
So actually the story I wanted to tell changed a couple of times. So what happened is Generation Africa is a collection of films. So there was a call in 2018, so 4 years actually. There's a call in 2018 from Steps. Steps Africa is a South African-based production company. They also own like AfriDocs, and they invested in like making like documentary content. And they had done a collection called, I think, Why Poverty, and it had like, it's a collection about poverty, but from filmmakers across the world.
Yeah.
And they realized like, a lot of the films around immigration actually, and wasn't told by African filmmakers. So when you see people sweeping up, in Europe or, like all the films, basically in the public space, a lot of films around kind of irregular immigration or, and things like that, weren't told by us. So that was the mandate for Steps and Generation. So that's what Generation Africa became. It was like, okay, let's start this. Let's African filmmakers start to tell our own stories with like documentary films around the theme of illegal immigration.
Yeah.
But also there was a whole skill up process because, like we're not documentary people. And our documentary mainstay started from like NGO docs, which is more like talking heads and interviews and not documentary film. So it started with like a call out for filmmakers to, send in, their thoughts around documentaries around this subject, And I remember like at the time, I think I was watching 90 Day Fiancé, right? And it was Michael and Angela. So my idea was around like that, it was around like, the idea of marriage as a way to Japa, as a way to immigrate. But where there was like inconsistencies, because, a lot of the time, and then I know I have family members where, that they came to find, but with the reverse, the reverse for me was not, like Michael finding an Igbo woman to go and marry abroad but more the story of the men who come back to find wives. But what are the wives thinking? Like what is, I know there's agency, but they also want to travel. They also want to, and even though the men might not have gotten their papers or they have to marry white women first. And there's this whole, and that's a whole other story, that I'm invested in is that idea of the man abroad coming here to find a wife, and the wife without knowing him or wanting to, go and meet this man abroad, and that was kind of where the concept started, but more around like, how do you start the concept of family, the concept of, life, and how that starts when somebody is not even there. So my uncle wasn't present for his traditional marriage either. They had to stand in for him. And, you see these things, happen like in the village, but you never really know about it before it happens. That's the problem, because people don't talk about it. You don't know that he's not going to be around. So it's mainly like something that comes up after. So over time, what I started to do was interview a lot of women and men actually, who have been in these marriages with their significant other abroad. And for some of them, they haven't been able to go for like 15, 17 years. But they're still married, and they're still in this family. They're doing, I wouldn't call it house help work, but they're taking care of his family here. And he sends money back, but in one or two situations he's not been able to come back because he still doesn't have his papers after 10 plus years. In another situation he comes back, but she still hasn't been able to join him because he has a wife there. That's so he comes back and just he comes back, impregnates her, goes back. So there's so many of this kind of like stories, and that's really what I wanted to explore. The whole thing was going to be a short, so I wanted it to start on the day it starts. So the idea was it was the wedding day itself, but also to just examine the psyche behind this person who was making this choice to go into this life, and hopefully come back to the same person much later in a few years and see if they've been able to go, if they've not been able to go, things like that. So it was actually called Igbanku because it was about the traditional wedding. And so I was looking for a bride who I would know about ahead of time and who would be able to, who I would have access to, of course. And that's how this came about. And, the man will be absent, which was what happened. But then what had happened was even worse, was because he was absent, his family took liberties because he had sent money, and they had gone there, but they hadn't seen how, I guess, I don't say impoverished they were. So it was they started to take the piss in terms of with something that is, and I thought like bride price negotiations were more. I mean, like, you already agree before you come. So that back and forth talk is not necessarily like make or break.
Yeah.
So until that happened, so that's the process. So, and because it was a collection, so ArtDey, as a broadcaster, contributed to it and brought some money. Steps Africa raised most of the money, and it's not just me. Other Nigerian filmmakers are part of the program. Ike Inebwe, he has his film No U-Turn. It premiered at Berlin. He just won at Durban. It's a feature film about a man who, because Ike made the trip. He attempted to make the trip about 20 years ago to get on a bus and go to Europe. But somehow he turned back somewhere in, I don't know if he got to Senegal or somewhere there he turned back. So basically, he now kind of made this film about him kind of going back and making that trip again, but then meeting people along the way. So Ike's film is there, and so the whole collection, and there were filmmakers. They ended up being about 28 of us across Africa, with shorts, long films from Sudan, but just different films coming from different angles. Some are more investigative. Some deals with like China and what they're taking over, like the ocean somewhere in Africa. Some deals with. So it's a great collection of films. So yeah.
Okay, so like for some of these financiers for docs, like, again, I guess it depends on what they are after, but like, are there certain things that kind of work in your favor when you're applying for these grants?
So for documentaries, the documentary space, I find it really interesting, especially because I guess people are not as I don't know, like, I find it really interesting, like it's almost untapped. And like, just recently, we have an Emmy nominated Nigerian filmmaker just this year, Chioma Onyenwe, who was nominated for Frederick Forsyth, the documentary. It's a HBO documentary film. So what happens is, because documentaries are not commercially viable, necessarily. So now, of course, you're able to get documentaries on streamers, but even then, it doesn't command the same fees as fiction. So you have to be really creative around fundraising around documentaries. So what is the documentary saying? If there's a message based, then there are different like organizations that might be attuned to that particular message that can reach out to. And for the market based as well. So like, we don't have, of course, other countries have more support financing and support countries, but with documentaries, there's still this Blue Ice Hot Docs Fund. So a lot of the documentary festivals have like markets attached to them that you can apply for like funding for. They're very competitive, but because we don't necessarily see a lot come out from Nigeria. And we have a lot of stories to tell. So it will be interesting to see. East Africa is doing great with documentaries. They're getting into Sundance. They're getting into PBS. What's the name of this film? I can't remember. It just slipped my mind. But yeah. So there's a lot of space in the documentary world, but then documentary films is softy. That's what I was trying to remember, softy. But documentary films are now, they're as engaging. There's conflict, there's tension, there's like it's not about talking, it's not about interviews. So it's also about knowing how to tell the stories, so you have an engaging film. So yeah, that's
okay. So yeah, at this point, can you mention 3 random facts about yourself?
3 random facts
Yeah.
about myself. What's a random fact? Well, it's not random. I also run an art website called ArtDey.com, ArtDey.com,
Yeah.
and I started during the pandemic to provide a platform for Nigerian artists and emerging artists. And yeah, so we sell art all over the world to connect like local artists to global collectors.
Yeah.
So that's one. 2, I've been trying to learn how to play the violin.
Okay.
And
How is that going?
I'm still constituting a nuisance,
Mm.
but I need to spend more time to take it seriously. But yeah, so that's great. And then 3 was the third random fact. Yeah, I think the third random fact is probably that, I actually dream of coaching an artistic swimming team
Okay.
from Nigeria. So synchronized swimming
Yeah.
and taking them to the Olympics. So I think it's the most beautiful sport, like to watch and to see, because this dance, this gymnastics, the swimming, this diving, like it's the most fascinating thing to watch. So I dream of like coaching a team
Yeah.
of young girls to the Olympics. So yeah, it's 3 random facts.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned that you can produce in your sleep, and you're also a creative producer in Daba.
Yeah.
You're a fellow.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you kind of, I guess, applied for that opportunity, did you apply with any projects? What are the benefits of being this creative producer?
Well, first of all, I think the application for the second cohort is open now, so people should definitely apply. What happened at the time, I didn't apply. So there are two that not all the producers that are in the program are applied with projects. For some, it's also about building that collective of film professionals.
Yeah.
In the industry and outside. And it's a great network. I think the most important thing about like this industry, really, especially if you intend to be in it for at least 50 years, is your network. Who are you aligned with? Who are you making? Like, you don't even have to be making stuff. Like, it doesn't even have to be something you're trying to take advantage of. It's more about kind of cultivating it, and to be able to be in a room with filmmakers across the continent and producers that have similar stories or different stories. They're trying to, your mind is expanded, so there's coaching and there's sessions and all of that, but it's really about networking across. And when you really think about it, like, it's the people that you grow with, people that you come up with that tend to be in your life for a much longer period. So, and that's the most important thing. I think the most important thing is like that cohort, like knowing that, and you're like, it opens you up so to start thinking about, oh, this is how, I have a friend who's making a film in Egypt, or, this person is doing something here, or he's doing something there. And then you become, you just start to build that. It's about building those networks. And that's how you become, that's how you become truly wealthy. It's like, what is your stake in people? Who are the people that are in your life? Who are the people that can count on you? Who are the people that, and it's a good first step to, to expanding that. So you're not stuck in a pigeonhole and thinking about just, it's easy to just think about like what's happening around me. This is the most important thing. But no, once your mind is open, then opportunities abound, so that's a great reason to be a part of that.
Yeah. Okay. You did you made or produced the 23419 podcast about advanced fee fraud.
Yes.
So again, like, how did this idea for the podcast start? Was the podcast the original medium you wanted to tell this story with?
Not necessarily. Like, the thing is, I'm still haven't finished telling that story. So I know that there's another, audiovisual medium that is key. But I wanted to, I mean, it's kind of like I saw what, like, I started listening to podcasts with Serial, so more true crime podcasts than interviews style podcasts. So I've always been fascinated by that. Then with Dirty John, for instance, there's a Netflix show that started off as a podcast as well.
Yeah.
So that was also like a thinking that came into it. But with 23419, I guess, I mean, it's a story, it's something I'd worked on for a few years as well. Just in gathering the information, I knew I wanted to tell the story of the OGs, of the OGs, of the guys in the 90s, because there's so much social media now. There's so much so with Hush Puppy, the news is inundated, and then you'd see that with these stories, people are going to come from outside, they're going to license it, they're going to try and tell it for us.
Yeah.
But it's never quite the same, because what would happen is, there's going to be a white savior. We're going to be portrayed in a certain light. And it's not that Nigerians are not stealing, or there's no fraud. There is fraud, but it's more than that. And for me, it was about telling a 360 story. So where you see that the person who has been said to be the victim, was also complicit. And that kind of changes the way, the story is told.
Yeah.
So I think it was important for me to tell the story first, and knowing that the podcast was obviously a more affordable way to do that. But also, I really wanted to also play with audio. I think I've been trying my hands at different things, at theater and different things. So with audio, I feel like if there's a discipline with not having anything else, to show, and just try and tell a story just with the sound, and it was an assignment for me to conquer. So that was also another reason why I did a podcast. But yeah.
Okay, so when should we be expecting a new season?
That's the problem. The problem is the problem is the research it requires. But I'm working on it. So it's now just in making sure I'm able to do detailed research. And researching here is really hard because access to documents is almost impossible. So I was very lucky as well to be able to get some of the documents that I did. I'm working on it.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, with your documentary and even with the people that you featured on the 23419 podcast, I mean, it takes a certain level of skill to be able to, I guess, always reassure and convince people to, share their stories. Do you have a certain approach that works for you?
Well, I think it does. But one, I guess you have to care and really care, we're very close. We live in a very kind of low trust society, right? So I actually find documentaries hard because it's hard to get open up. We don't, and we're not very introspective. What would happen is even as we open up, we don't ascribe certain things. We're not really thinking about, this is why this thing happened, So we ascribe things to God, just or to, or that you'll be well, or, nobody really wants to dwell in there in any pain or, so it's still, I still find it really challenging. But it's really about just being present. I find to get real access, you have to be present for people to trust you. You just have to be there.
Okay. You produced the August Meeting stage play. What were you trying to explore with that stage play? August
Meeting was still like I say, in terms of my storytelling, it's stories in the intersection of history, culture. It's really, nobody knows. I research, I read. And the idea that history is not even something that we study anymore. Or when you're telling the stories of, I think it was around 2017, when was the Me Too movement? There was like when the Me Too movement started, and it was now like this was like modern day feminism, and or and that's kind of like not onslaught, but there was a whole move towards from 2016 2017. And the idea from me was like, there are women in our past who have stood for something, but we don't know who those women are, and if 100 years ago, like Igbo women were independent, Igbo women were, independent yet to a degree, but Igbo women were able to do it. They were the only force in Nigeria who fought the British. And so their stories deserve to be told. Today, and so so that was really like the reason why August Meeting. And then August Meeting, of course, because it's something I think August Meeting is currently happening right now in some towns, but also just linking that to who we are today, and linking who we were and what we could be. I guess that was how the idea for that came about.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what's that one movie or TV show that you always love to rewatch?
What do I love to rewatch? Shit, on the top of my head now, I'd say Kung Fu Hustle.
Okay.
Because I think I probably watched that the most. Like I can't stop watching it every time it comes up. But yeah, Kung Fu Hustle. Yeah. Which is weird.
And what about it? It keeps drawing you back to it.
I guess it's the perfect. Now thinking as a film person, right? It's just like it's a perfect hero's journey, like unwilling hero's journey. But more than that, it's just like very enjoyable. Every and it's also one of the non-Hollywood films that I consumed much earlier. So it's the same thing. When you think that a lot of your diet is coming from one place, and then you see something that is not quite it wasn't Hollywood, it wasn't Nollywood, but it was like, it was very well told. So it was one of my early introductions to like Asian cinema. But yeah, I guess I just enjoy it. Like I haven't thought about it. I just like I watch it all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You have released over 20 projects in different formats. For you, when you're, starting a new project, you're planning to release it in a new medium. Like, how do you prepare yourself? Because, let's say about filmmaking, you master the art of making films, and it takes a lot of time. But for you, you've, moved across several mediums. How do you prepare yourself when you're doing that?
I don't know that I do. I just know that I guess I lead with story. So it's more, what is the story I want to tell first? And then you find that some stories lend themselves to different mediums, right? So with August Meeting, you needed to be a call for action. I didn't want to do anything subtle. I wanted, people to be angry, to be in the moment. And then stage was obviously like the best medium for that. Yeah, I think the story comes first, and I guess like if you're true to story, like if you're trying to tell a good story regardless, then it would that's really the preparation for me. The medium is now just if you want to do stage, who are the people that want to do stage, who can, and then all of that is like is similar in terms of planning. Yeah.
Yeah, so, with your experience from Afrif, you have come across a lot of Nollywood content. For you, what do you think we should prioritize as an industry in order to like elevate our standing in terms of the art and in terms of, the technical ability of our films? What should we focus on?
Writing, storytelling, but writing, because it all starts with the script. And I think which is why when they're like residencies, I really hope that more people apply. And because I find that storytelling needs time to breathe, and most times we don't have the luxury of time, right? So you want to get 4 things out done. You want to writing 20 scripts, and so you're not able to breathe, you're not able to experience life, you're not able to travel, you're not able to meet people, you're not able to draw from a well because you haven't feel that well. And so the writing suffers as a result. Just so it doesn't feel authentic because your experiences are not authentic, So the writing, the development process is definitely where we still have a lot of work to do. Because we're such a great audience when you think about it, because we don't care for much, like it's just more like we want to. I think the Nigerian audience is great because we just want you to show that you give a shit. We just want you to show that you care, and so that you don't take us for fools, and we accept everything else. So we would watch, technically bad films, but we're not looking for great production design. We're not. We're just looking for good storytelling. And that really comes from the writing. And I feel like if we can spend more time developing stories and spend more time with the writing, have the writing workshopped, so it doesn't, you're not shooting your first or second draft. You're able to you're able to really kind of invest in that process, then we would be a lot, because all of the technical bits we're borrowing from professional. The sound will get better. So all of that bits can be fixed, but it's where the mind. This series just came out, Sandman, right? Neil Gaiman wrote the comics when he was 26 years old, and it's a fantastic comic series. And he was doing. I saw an interview of him in Variety, and even as they were adapting the comics to television, they were having problems. He was part of that development writing team, and he was having problems. And he said, he said something about having to go back to the 26-year-old him. And that 26-year-old guy was like, "Look at you, like you've won awards. You're now a big, You're an award-winning, older, established writer, but you're still coming to tap from my well,
Yeah.
And it's really that. It comes from everywhere, right? It comes from like your dreams and your thoughts and your inspiration and what you watch and what you read and but it's really about, I don't know, like, I don't know how to say it again, but but the writing is important, and the writing is important, and which means the living is important. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So where can we watch 8 Bars on the Clef?
Where can you watch it? It's not available anywhere at this time, but once it is, I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. And
All right.
Yeah, how can people keep up with your work, like the new projects you're working on?
Well, I have a website, and I'm on Twitter. So I guess I normally would tweet things out. So my Twitter is CH10MA, and my website is Raconteur Productions. So that's RACONTEUR-productions.com. And yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Chioma, for coming on the podcast.
All right. Thank you. This is a very extensive conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
I enjoyed it. All right.
We have come to the end of this episode. Remember to rate and review the podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Selegov Film, and the podcast at the Naija Film Pod to share your feedback. You can now support the podcast by visiting the website to donate. See you on the next episode. Have a good one.